Self-made, George Williams grew up in a modest flat tucked between the bustling streets of East London. Life was noisy, fast, and filled with countless distractions. While most of his classmates had a clear sense of who they wanted to become: footballers, doctors, musicians, George felt lost. He wasn't bad at anything in particular, but he didn't feel outstanding at anything either. He was just floating. His parents were hardworking, kind, and supportive. His mum cleaned offices during the day and waitressed at night, while his dad worked long hours as a delivery driver. They dreamed of a better life for George, often encouraging him to study hard and aim high. But George didn't know what high meant for him. The idea of going to university, getting a 9-to-5 job, and living a predictable life didn't excite him. He wanted more, but he didn't know what that more looked like. At 15, George's world changed subtly but permanently, thanks to someone he had often overlooked: his grandfather. George's grandfather, Albert Williams, was a quiet man in his 70s, living in a small cottage on the outskirts of London. He had retired years ago and spent most of his time gardening, reading old newspapers, or fixing things in his dusty garage. George saw him during family visits on holidays, but had never truly spoken to him until one summer break. That year, George's parents decided he should spend 2 weeks with his grandfather, away from the noise of London. George protested. 2 weeks in the countryside with an old man? What am I supposed to do there? But his parents insisted, hoping the fresh air and slow pace would do him good. When George arrived, the house felt frozen in time. No Wi-Fi, no video games, no busy streets, just silence, birdsong, and the smell of old books and oil paint. He rolled his eyes, dropped his bag, and mentally counted down the days. But Albert wasn't what George expected. He was sharp, witty, and surprisingly insightful. On the second day, as they sat in the garden drinking tea, Albert asked, "So, George, what are you passionate about?" George hesitated. "I don't know. Nothing really." Albert gave him a knowing look. "You know, I used to feel the same at your age. Lost. Like the world wanted me to follow a path that didn't fit me." George looked up, interested despite himself. "Really? What did you do?" Albert smiled. "I listened, not to the noise but to myself." He stood up and gestured for George to follow him into the garage. It was filled with paintings, sketches, and tiny models. "I was supposed to become a mechanic. That's what my father wanted. But I loved creating art, design, anything that made me feel alive. I followed that path and, though it wasn't easy, I never regretted it." George looked around, his eyes landing on a shelf with old journals. One had design ideas, 1963 written on the cover. His grandfather saw him staring. "You see, George, discovering who you are starts with exploring what excites you, what makes you lose track of time, what you do even if no one paid you." That night, George couldn't sleep. His grandfather's words repeated in his head. What makes me lose track of time? He didn't know yet, but for the first time, he wanted to find out. Back in London, George started paying closer attention to himself. He began noticing what he enjoyed. He liked sketching logos, rearranging his desk into different layouts, and following brands on Instagram to see how they grew. He began watching videos about design, entrepreneurship, and business ideas. He devoured interviews with self-made founders and scribbled notes in a cheap notebook. One evening, while helping his mum clean an office building, George saw a man in a suit pacing on the phone, whiteboard behind him filled with strategy charts and business goals. The man was in charge, creating his own path just like Grandpa Albert. That image stuck with George. By 17, George started experimenting. He created custom-designed phone cases using free online tools and resold them to friends at school. They weren't perfect, but people liked them. Some even asked for personalized designs. The feedback thrilled him. His classmates noticed. "Are you starting a brand or something?" one boy asked mockingly. George shrugged, smiling. "Maybe I am." His grandfather became his quiet mentor. They had long phone calls on weekends. George would describe his ideas, and Albert would listen carefully, then say, "How will this add value to someone's life?" Or, "What problem does this solve?" Albert didn't spoon-feed answers. He helped George think. One weekend, George visited again, this time willingly. Albert gave him an old wooden box. Inside were dozens of sketches, logos, business plans, and design journals. "These are my old dreams," he said. "I want you to use them as fuel for yours." By 18, George launched his first official brand, G Creative Co. It started with lifestyle accessories backpacks, art notebooks, and phone stands with minimalist designs. He built a basic website using tutorials and marketed his products on Instagram. His room turned into a mini studio. He designed, packed, and shipped every order himself. It was exhausting, but exhilarating. At first, the orders were small, just friends and family. Then, one day, a local influencer shared his notebook on their story. Overnight, George had 120 orders. He was stunned. He called his grandfather immediately. "Grandpa, it's happening. People really like what I made." Albert chuckled softly. "It's because it came from you, George. You finally found what makes you come alive." At 20, George had turned G Creative Co. into a recognized brand. He had a small team, a rented workspace, and monthly revenue he never imagined possible. He reinvested in better packaging, cleaner design, and ethical sourcing. He was invited to a youth entrepreneur event in London as a guest speaker. Standing on the stage, dressed in a tailored navy suit, George looked out at hundreds of teenagers just like he once was and smiled. "When I was 15, he began, "I didn't know who I was. I thought success meant following the crowd. But my grandfather helped me listen to something far more powerful myself." The room went still. He asked me what made me feel alive, what made me forget time. That question led me to everything I have now. He paused, looking around. "I wasn't born a businessman. I became one by paying attention to the small things that lit me up inside. And with patience, hard work, and a few stumbles I built my dream." At 23, George's company had grown into a boutique creative brand distributed in several European stores. He was earning more than enough to live comfortably, travel, and give back. He launched workshops for teens to explore entrepreneurship and creativity, naming the program Project Albert, in honor of his grandfather. Albert passed away that year, peacefully, with a smile on his face. In the letter he left for George, he wrote, Dear George, I always believed in you. You just had to believe in yourself too. Never stop building. Never stop listening to the world. Yes, but mostly to your own heart. Love, Grandpa.